On this Versus, I'm comparing two pale gold mediums activated by water that are produced by German companies. The contenders are Coliro Pearl Colors in Moon Gold and Schmincke Aqua Bronze in Rich Pale Gold. I'm calling them mediums because while the Coliro is similar to a watercolor, the Aqua Bronze is really nothing like one. I'll test them both on 4 types of paper: mineral paper, Tyvek, 100-pound cardstock, and heavyweight printmaking paper. I'll include all the paper details down below. Now for the framing. I'm taping 2 squares on the 4 papers and will paint 1 and 2 coats for each medium. First up is Coliro's Moon Gold. The instructions recommend adding water to the pan. I'm using a straw as a pipette to add some water drops, letting it sit for 2 minutes, then mixing it well before trying to paint with it. The 2-minute wait time does seem to help with making more pigment available to paint with. The very smooth mineral paper makes the Coliro easy to apply. The paper doesn't absorb any water, which usually increases streakiness, but here the streaks are minimal and I get a surprisingly even first coat. Tyvek has a similar lack of water absorption, but since the surface of the Tyvek is very textured, the Coliro gathers around every fiber and dimple in the synthetic paper, leaving a patchier look. The texture does make the Coliro look sparklier, though. The cardstock takes more water mixed into the Coliro to spread it over the smooth surface. The paper really holds on to the pigment, giving pretty high coverage for a single coat. But the grabbiness of the paper makes it harder to get a low streak finish. While the printmaking paper is textured and highly water absorbent, it's fairly easy to get a low streak, high pigment first coat down quickly. I let everything dry for 1 minute, then start on the second coat. It is possible to get more pigment on the mineral paper, but I found it difficult to keep the second coat from having a more streaky finish. I was worried I would wipe off the pigment I had already applied on the Tyvek. However, the experience of applying the second coat was very similar to the first coat, with slightly more streakiness. When painting on the cardstock, I noticed the Coliro pigment kept balling up. I was able to get decent coverage and a low streak finish, but the surface had a crummy, textured look to it. The second coat on the printmaking paper has a dense, smooth metallic finish that felt very similar to what you can get with a fluid acrylic paint. Let me rinse the brush and get set up for the next medium. To prepare the Schmincke Aqua Bronze in rich pale gold, you need to add a few drops of water to the metallic powder and then mix it. The powder doesn't really dissolve. It's more like the water acts as the medium for applying the powder to a surface. Unfortunately, the drop of water I add turns out to be too much. When I paint it on the mineral paper, the aqua bronze immediately beads up and the pigments swirl in the water, not really sticking to the surface at all. I try mixing the powder and the water together more, and this helps somewhat, but I end up just smearing around the powder suspended in water until I get close to some kind of coverage. I have a similar problem with Tyvek, but since the surface is so much more textured, it actually holds on to more of the powder, even if it is still a streaky mess. The absorption level of the cardstock helps with all the water, and maybe some of the extra blending I'm doing is getting more of the metallic powder on the surface of the cardstock. It looks way more even than the previous two papers. Then again, maybe the extra blending didn't do much at all, because I'm back to the streaky swirls on the printmaking paper. Its absorption level does help settle things down a bit, but the coverage is definitely sheerer than on the cardstock. With everything such a watery mess, I decided to wait 2 minutes this time before attempting a second coat. While the aqua bronze had dried on the mineral paper, the water immediately reactivated the swirly sheerness of before. I figured out that I needed to scrape up some of the pigment from the side of my palette, then dab it carefully on the paper. That worked much better. By the time I applied the aqua bronze to the Tyvek, I was fully invested in the scrape and dab method, and I got an even better application. The texture of the Tyvek really held on to the powder, giving it almost full coverage. I had to be careful with dabbing too much on the cardstock, because whatever I had just put down could easily lift off and leave white patches. The printmaking paper also required a lot of caution with the dabbing method, but the high absorption of the paper made blobbing on a lot of pigment-filled water way less of a mess. Even then, the coverage was only so-so. Now I'll remove the framing tape. As a side note, when I removed the tape from the cardstock, I accidentally touched the aqua bronze section, and it immediately lifted off the page onto my finger. So you would probably need to seal the aqua bronze before handling it, or it could flake right off. If you'd like me to test a few different sealing methods, leave me a comment below. Let's take a closer look at each paper. On the mineral paper, the Coliro has much more light reflection than the aqua bronze, even taking into consideration the aqua bronze's uneven application. What is interesting is how the streakiness differs between them from one coat to two coats. Brushstroke streaks on the Coliro are more visible on the second coat, while the brushstrokes on the second coat of the aqua bronze are more faint. On the Tyvek, while the light reflection from the Coliro is still higher, the aqua bronze reflects more light here on the Tyvek than on the mineral paper. Both have some streakiness in the first coat, but the aqua bronze gets very close to full opaque coverage on the second coat, while the Coliro keeps the streaks. On the cardstock, the light reflection is approaching similar levels here, with the Coliro just edging out the aqua bronze. Both have some streaking on the first coat that is mostly smoothed out by adding the second coat. There is the issue of visible balled-up pigment on the surface of the cardstock when using each medium, but the graininess of the aqua bronze hides it better. On the printmaking paper, the Coliro definitely reflects more light than the aqua bronze. More of the Coliro pigment gripped the printmaking paper, leaving a smooth, opaque finish, particularly with the addition of a second coat. While the aqua bronze looks sheerer and more textured here, those are interesting effects that I may want depending on the project. Overall, I'd say that Coliro Moon Gold is easier to work with and gives the kind of dense and smooth metallic finish in a watercolor style pan that's usually only possible with fluid acrylic paint. That said, Schmincke's Aqua Bronze in rich pale gold is unlike any other metallic medium I've worked with. The level of metal-like shine to the finish that is possible if I get the water level and application right is pretty amazing and worth spending some time with to figure out. Thanks for joining me. I would truly appreciate you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. If you know any other intriguing metallic mediums, share them in the comments. See you in the next one.